Morgan Reynolds was exhausted. After 12 straight hours of emergency surgeries at Memorial Hospital, all she wanted was to walk her rescue greyhound Pixel and collapse into bed. The late April evening had finally cooled from the unseasonable heat that had gripped the suburbs of Phoenix all week, and stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She unclipped her hospital badge and tossed it onto the passenger seat of her car before reaching into the back for Pixel's leash. "Come on, boy. Quick walk and then we both get to sleep," she murmured, clipping the leash to his collar as he bounded out of the car. The Sycamore Hills subdivision where Morgan had purchased her modest ranch-style home 2 years ago was known for its winding streets and well-maintained walking paths. Her own street, Mulberry Lane, bordered the more upscale Oak Ridge Estates, with its gated entrance and manicured lawns. The two neighborhoods shared a small park and pond at their intersection, technically on Sycamore Hills property but used by residents of both communities. As Morgan and Pixel rounded the corner toward the pond, she released a deep sigh. The water reflected the last pink streaks of sunset, and ducks paddled lazily along the surface. This was exactly what she needed after a day of medical chaos, 5 minutes of peace before heading home. She had just settled onto a bench when a shrill voice shattered the tranquility. "Excuse me. This area is for Oak Ridge residents only." Morgan turned to see a woman marching toward her with purpose, designer handbag swinging from her elbow, phone clutched in her manicure hand like a weapon. The woman's highlighted blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her face was contorted in what Morgan could only describe as practiced outrage. "I'm sorry," Morgan said, genuinely confused. "You heard me. This pond is private property. Oak Ridge Estates residents only. I've never seen you at any of our meetings, and I'm the HOA secretary, so I know everyone." The woman crossed her arms and glared down at Morgan, who remained seated, Pixel now alert at her feet. "Actually, I live in Sycamore Hills, and this pond is. Do not give me that. I've been on the board for 6 years. I wrote the bylaws about the recreational areas myself. This is Oak Ridge property, and you're trespassing." The woman pulled out her phone. "I'm calling security." Morgan blinked slowly, fatigue momentarily overriding her ability to process the absurdity of the situation. She had spent the day saving lives, and now this woman was threatening to have her removed from a public bench. "Look, Ms. Peterson," Brenda Peterson. "Ms. Peterson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This pond actually belongs to Sycamore Hills. I've been living here for 2 years and—" "Are you calling me a liar?" Brenda's voice rose an octave. "I've already taken your picture. Our security team will be adding you to the trespasser database." Morgan felt a headache building behind her eyes. Pixel whined softly, sensing the tension. She stood up slowly, trying to defuse the situation. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm just a tired doctor trying to walk my dog after a long shift." Brenda's eyes narrowed, scanning Morgan's scrubs skeptically. "Anyone can buy scrubs at a uniform store. I'm going to need to see some ID." That was the moment Morgan's patience evaporated. She wasn't required to prove her identity to this stranger, especially not when she was standing less than 300 yards from her own front door. "No, you don't need to see my ID. This is public property, and I'm going home now. Have a good evening." As Morgan turned to leave, Brenda stepped directly in her path. "You're not going anywhere until security arrives. I've had enough of you people cutting through our neighborhood, using our amenities, and lowering our property values." Morgan hadn't noticed the small crowd gathering at the edges of the confrontation until a man's voice called out, "Is everything okay over there?" What happened next would set in motion a neighborhood battle that nobody in Sycamore Hills or Oak Ridge Estates would soon forget. The man who had called out approached them with a confused expression. He was in his 60s, wearing comfortable khakis and a polo shirt with the Sycamore Hills neighborhood logo embroidered on the pocket. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, glancing between Morgan and Brenda. Brenda straightened her posture, clearly pleased to have an audience. "I was just explaining to this trespasser that the pond area is for Oak Ridge residents only, Tom. I've already called security." Tom Wilson frowned, looking genuinely perplexed. "Brenda, this pond is in Sycamore Hills. It's on our property." "That's absolutely ridiculous," Brenda scoffed. "Oak Ridge Estates paid for the landscaping and maintenance of this entire area. Our HOA fees are 3 times what you people pay precisely because we maintain superior amenities." Morgan recognized Tom as the president of the Sycamore Hills Neighborhood Association. She'd met him at the Welcome Barbecue when she first moved in, though they hadn't spoken much since. "Actually," Tom said, pulling out his phone, "I have the property maps right here. We keep digital copies of everything since the boundary dispute last year with the commercial development." Brenda's face twitched slightly. What boundary dispute? There was no dispute. By now, several other residents had gathered around. Morgan spotted her next-door neighbor Elena with her twins, and an elderly couple who walked their corgi past her house every evening. From the Oak Ridge side, two women in tennis outfits stood whispering to each other, and a man in a golf cart had pulled up to observe. Tom turned his phone to show Brenda the screen. See, the pond and the surrounding 50 feet are all Sycamore Hills property. Always have been. The walking path that circles it was designed to be shared between both communities. That can't be right, Brenda insisted, barely glancing at the screen. I've been on the Architectural Review Committee for 4 years. We approved the fountain installation. As a gesture of goodwill, Tom explained patiently, because your residents use this area too. But the land belongs to Sycamore Hills. Morgan felt Pixel tugging at his leash, eager to continue their walk. She was beyond exhausted and didn't want to be caught in the middle of a neighborhood property dispute. Look, I think I'll just head home. No, Brenda snapped. You stay right there until we sort this out. Security should be here any minute. Alina stepped forward, her twins hiding behind her legs. Morgan lives 3 houses down from me. She's definitely a Sycamore Hills resident. I don't care where she lives, Brenda huffed. She's using private Oak Ridge amenities without permission. The man in the golf cart cleared his throat. Brenda, I think you might be mistaken about this one. Morgan recognized him as Charles Bentley, the Oak Ridge Estate's HOA president whom she'd met at a community fundraiser. Unlike Brenda, he seemed reasonable and was respected by residents of both neighborhoods. Brenda whirled to face him. Charles, thank goodness you're here. This woman refuses to leave our property, and now Tom's trying to claim the pond belongs to Sycamore Hills. Charles sighed heavily. Because it does, Brenda. We've been over this in 3 separate board meetings. The pond is on their side of the property line. We contribute to its maintenance as a courtesy because our residents enjoy it too. The color drained from Brenda's face, quickly replaced by an angry flush. That's not what the documents say. I have copies at home. The documents you drafted last month, Charles asked wearily, and ones I told you had no legal standing because they contradicted the county records. Those documents? A ripple of whispers spread through the growing crowd. Morgan felt a twinge of sympathy for Brenda, whose embarrassment was now on full display before an audience from both neighborhoods. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Morgan offered diplomatically. It's getting late, and I should really. Oh, there's certainly been a misunderstanding, Brenda interrupted, her voice trembling. And I intend to get to the bottom of it. I'll be bringing this up at the next Oak Ridge board meeting. With evidence. 2 men in uniforms bearing the Oak Ridge Estate's security logo approached the group. One of them nodded respectfully to Charles. You called for security, sir. Before Charles could respond, Brenda jumped in. Yes, I did. This woman is trespassing, and I want her removed immediately. The older security guard looked confused. Ma'am, we're on Sycamore Hills property right now. We don't have jurisdiction here. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Morgan knew she should feel vindicated, but mostly she just wanted to go home and sleep. Yet as she looked at Brenda's reddening face, she realized this confrontation was far from over. The battle lines had been drawn. And somehow, despite her best efforts to avoid neighborhood politics, Morgan found herself at the center of what was about to become a full-blown suburban war. The week following the board meeting was suspiciously quiet. Morgan returned to her hospital shifts, and life in Sycamore Hills seemed to settle back into its normal rhythm. The makeshift checkpoints disappeared, and residents from both neighborhoods once again walked freely around the pond without confrontation. But on Saturday morning, as Morgan sipped coffee on her front porch with Pixel lounging at her feet, she noticed unusual activity across the street. A surveyor in an official-looking vest was placing markers along the property line that separated Sycamore Hills from Oak Ridge Estates, while a woman in a business suit took photos and made notes on a tablet. Morgan's neighbor, Mr. Grayson, an 82-year-old retired attorney who'd lived in the neighborhood since it was built, hobbled over to her yard. Trouble brewing, he said, nodding toward the surveyors. That's Patricia Whitmore from County Planning and Zoning. Never a good sign when she shows up unannounced. Morgan frowned. You think this has something to do with Brenda's annexation plan? Count on it, Mr. Grayson replied. I've tangled with people like your HOA Karen before. They don't take defeat gracefully. By noon, the rumor mill was in full swing. Lena texted that Brenda had been spotted at City Hall with a thick folder of documents. Tom called an emergency meeting of the Sycamore Hills board for that evening and asked Morgan to attend. The community room at the local library was packed beyond capacity. Tom stood at the front looking more serious than Morgan had ever seen him. I'll get straight to the point, he began. Brenda Peterson has filed a petition with the county claiming that the original property lines between our neighborhoods were incorrectly surveyed in 1982. She's requesting a formal review and potential redrawing of the boundaries. A collective groan filled the room. That's not all, Tom continued. She's also filed a civil complaint against Morgan Reynolds for deliberate interference with HOA operations and defamation of character. All eyes turned to Morgan, who felt her stomach drop. A lawsuit? Over a neighborhood spat? It's a nuisance suit, Mr. Grayson called out from the back row, designed to intimidate and drain resources. Classic bully tactic. Tom nodded. Our association lawyer agrees, but we'll still need to respond and legal fees add up quickly. A young father stood up. My wife and I just bought our house last year. If they redraw the boundaries and force us into Oak Ridge, we can't afford the increased taxes and HOA fees. We have to sell. Similar concerns echoed around the room. For many Sycamore Hills residents, the financial implications were significant. Older residents on fixed incomes, young families who'd stretched their budgets to afford their first homes, all would be affected if Brenda's boundary dispute succeeded. We need to fight this, Morgan said, standing up. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who chose to live in Sycamore Hills because it fit their needs and budget. Fighting means money, Tom replied grimly. Legal representation, expert witnesses, court costs. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars that our HOA simply doesn't have. The room fell silent as the reality of their situation sank in. Brenda had found their weakness. Oak Ridge Estates, with its higher fees and wealthier residents, had the financial resources for a protracted legal battle. Sycamore Hills did not. As the meeting broke up, Charles Bentley was waiting outside. He pulled Morgan aside, his expression troubled. I tried to stop her, he said. The board voted to withhold HOA funds from any legal action, but Brenda's proceeding independently. She's convinced several wealthy homeowners to back her financially. Why? Morgan asked. What does she possibly gain from this? Charles sighed. It's not rational anymore. It's about saving face. You embarrass her publicly, and in her world, that's unforgivable. Morgan drove home feeling the weight of responsibility. She hadn't asked to become the neighborhood champion, but somehow she'd ended up as Brenda's primary target. When she arrived home, there was a formal-looking envelope taped to her door. Inside was a summons for the civil lawsuit Brenda had filed, seeking $50,000 in damages for emotional distress, defamation, and business interference. Morgan's heart raced as she scanned the document, noting that the first court date was just 2 weeks away. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Dr. Reynolds, this is Patricia Whitmore from County Planning and Zoning. I understand you're involved in the Oak Ridge-Sycamore boundary dispute. Apparently so, Morgan replied dryly. I thought you should know that Ms. Peterson has submitted some concerning documentation. Old survey maps that appear to have been altered. Nothing definitively fraudulent, but enough to raise red flags. Morgan sat up straighter. Are you saying she tampered with official records? I'm not saying anything officially, Patricia replied carefully. But if someone were to request the original survey records from the county archives and compare them to what was submitted in this petition, they might find some interesting discrepancies. After hanging up, Morgan immediately called Tom and Mr. Grayson to relay the conversation. The retired attorney chuckled. Patricia and I go way back. She's practically telling you she's found evidence of document fraud but can't officially investigate without a formal complaint. Tom was already making plans, all over the archives first thing Monday morning. If Brenda altered documents for her petition, that's criminal. The next day, while walking Pixel around the pond, Morgan spotted